What's up guys, Houndish here, today with Destiny 2 updates and news. So, as always, Bungie give us updates regarding the game at the moment, particular issues with the live game, including heavy metal. By the way, let us know, have you been playing heavy metal? Down in the comments. I have been absolutely ganged by a series of brigs more times than I care to discuss right here, all in the name of fun. We'll discuss that, as well as other live updates. Bungie also drop a couple of small teasers for Renegades, giving us a bit of flavour on how they're approaching this expansion. We'll also talk about changes to featured exotics in Ash and Iron, some of the content we'll see there, and the impending reveal for the upcoming expansion. So, a few things to touch on guys. If you do enjoy it, a rating below very much helps me and the channel, but now let's get into it. First up today, a few smaller shouts from the Destiny team right here. They say, initially, keep in mind, last week they referenced the Void aspect Bastion for Titans having a faster cooldown in PvP, which is incorrect, and Bastion will instead have a faster cooldown in PvE. Worth reiterating that, as I have seen a few folks talk about it being a bit bonkers actually buffing it for PvP. Otherwise, in the portal now, Grappler is disabled indefinitely, and in a future update the modifier will return as a selectable option, but not a forced option, so that's good as well. In terms of the communications we're likely to see this week though, Bungie have said there'll be a round of weapon, armor and ability sandbox changes coming up in the September update, and this week they'll have a full list of tuning changes including buffs, but for the moment they did highlight specifically things that feel oppressive in PvP combat, like Graviton Spike, Spreadshot hand cannons, lightweight throwing knives and Gambler's Dodge. Plus they confirmed that Trials mistakenly is using lobby balancing at the moment, and that will actually be removed in September as well. But importantly, as DMG reiterates right here, the details on sandbox tuning hopefully will land this week on Thursday. So that's a bit of a preview of what we can expect technically. On top of that, it's possible Bungie will give us a bit more detail regarding Ash and Iron specifically, and confirmations about the upcoming Renegades reveal on the 9th of September as well, so I'll keep you guys up to date on those. And next up, onto heavy metal this week. Firstly, it's worth saying players were pretty depressed when they booted up the game mode from the tower node, as this version drops old gear. As we discussed in the video yesterday, you're going to want to boot heavy metal up from the portal, or indeed the event tab, as otherwise you get irrelevant loot from back in vanilla Destiny 2 and stuff like that. Bungie have said they're investigating issues where heavy metal from the tower node drops blue gear and older legacy gear. Until we can disable the node, we recommend launching the activity from the portal instead. So, important heads up there for anyone who missed that memo. In terms of the loot drops though, we do get a lot of drops of the new sword and shotgun. We've discussed roles for these previously, but obviously coming out of Solstice, players were hoping that we might get the +1 treatment for gear tiers in the event. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, so it basically works the same way as all Crucible loot right now. And I believe we'll only get tier 5 drops when we're at 450 power, the exceptions being if you get a prime drop from one of the games. I don't know if you can get heavy metal prime drops, as in a tier 5 sword, as a random prime, or whether it's reserved exclusively for other things in the loot pool, which of course does include Crucible weapons. So even if you're not getting tier 5 heavy metal drops, there is the potential that one of your primes inside of this is going to be one of the Crucible rewards. So some players picked up things like this, the Returned Memory, which is the new rocket assisted frame specifically for Crucible. So in a weird kind of way, if you're not a huge PvP player but you don't mind heavy metal, then it does open up opportunities to get some of the Crucible reward pool. So that in itself is good. Otherwise, if you're at 450 power, you're going to get tier 5 juicy heavy metal drops. If you're not at max power, then for the moment you'll have to settle for tier 4s, although we know technically the difference between tier 4 and 5 is relatively tiny on weapons, so technically speaking, we get loads of opportunities at these, but yeah, it's a shame Bungie didn't give it the Solstice treatment. It would have been kind of an easy win, given how players are feeling at the moment. Otherwise, give us your impressions of heavy metal down below. A separate quick shout here, but Alison Lurs from Bungie, who's the narrative director, did an interview with GameSpot, and it's interesting to see Bungie's approach in terms of storytelling in the expansions this year. There's a brief mention of Renegades though, and they asked the question, it seems like the Edge of Fate set up a lot of long-term story threads, but Renegades sounds like it'll be more of its own thing. So how are you approaching storytelling going forward in Destiny 2 overall from expansion to expansion? And Alison says, Renegades picks up where Edge of Fate left off, and it's actually a direct continuation of the Fate saga. We made the deliberate choice not to make this a bottle episode or a one-off, and instead knew our players would engage more deeply if we made Renegades an inherent part of the broader story. So Renegades focuses on the ramifications of 3's death and what the other 9 are doing in response. Plus, as we've discussed recently, lore suggests that a Cabal faction are stockpiling weapons on Mars. and potentially interacting with a new dredging character that we haven't met in-game before. And that even comes from the Renegades description, where we'll dive into a criminal underworld and take down an evil empire by venturing into a lawless frontier to reveal deeper mysteries about a new dredger in Seoul. So it should be an interesting story, obviously interspersed with the Star Wars theme. Allison also said that we already know how the Fate saga ends. We set out a plan for the next saga, and we knew we wanted to set ourselves up for storytelling success by having a goal to work towards. We treat the story structure like a skeleton. We know the basics, but how we achieve them is flexible and adaptable. That means we can seed new elements now that will pay off at the very end, and as a result, we've got a story that feels rich while allowing us, as creators, flexibility as we go. Plus, she indicated moving forward, expect more new friends, deeper time with familiar ones, and a bigger focus on characters moving the world through their choices. So that's a bit of sort of Bungie's narrative direction, I guess, moving into Renegades and the rest of the Fate saga. Moving on though, to touch on a few things related to Ash and Iron right here. Featured gear that we currently have will remain featured at least until December with the next major expansion. However, Bungie did say, with certain exotic armor and weapons specifically being featured right now, these will also be changed with each expansion and major update. So this was the wording when they originally announced featured exotics. We haven't had any additional details on how that will actually change in the September update. I'm kind of hoping that they'll add more featured exotics as opposed to taking stuff away, but we don't have a specific confirmation just yet, so I would assume, with it being Bungie's last opportunity to really talk about it this week, we'll probably get some details in the next couple of days. I would assume that the Renegades reveal and the sort of stream before Ash and Iron will probably be at 9 AM Pacific, an hour before we get to Weekly Reset. Something else to keep in mind, if you've pre-ordered the Year of Prophecy and Renegades specifically, on September 9th, some of those pre-order items will actually become available. That will include an exclusive exotic ship and legendary emblem, so that stands for existing pre-orders right now, but also any that will be made after Bungie's reveal next week, which of course is going to be a pretty big moment. So I'm curious to see more about Renegades, but in terms of what's coming with the Ash and Iron update, of course, the Plaguelands is returning with an event called New Territory and the game mode specifically named Reclaim. So with us being in Season of Reclamation, it's kind of odd because 2.5 months in, or whatever it'll be, we're actually getting the bulk of the seasonal content, which is free to play. That also outlines that we get the brand new exotic mission, which of course will have an exotic weapon, and there'll be an additional exotic weapon in the updated rewards pass for Ash and Iron. Otherwise, plenty of portal updates, which we have spoken about in a couple of separate videos, and the epic version of Desert Perpetual will be dropping on September 20th too. So like I say, there'll be a lot of anticipation for what Bungie reveal next week, both in terms of content in the more immediate future, for Ash and Iron specifically, but also Renegades, not least because it's the next major content drop, but it's also kind of a different angle for Bungie to do a Star Wars inspired drop, so I will as always keep you posted on that. For the moment though, that is everything we have to talk about, so if you guys have enjoyed the video, a rating below really does help us out. Keep it locked and loaded as well for all of the details that we'll get next week, but otherwise for the moment, I appreciate you all tuning in, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.